We had an episode 0, but we don't really talk about episode 0. And just by speaking about it, I've already broken the rule. I'm Meeps. Here with me are Rise and Jay. Today we'll be discussing the state of the game in BFA, but first we want to fill in a bit of the gap left from last week's episode where we talked about the history of the guild. And do either of you remember much about Dirty Rat and the Boys? Because I've been straining to remember exactly when they joined. I think it was Antorus.
Well, so I would actually, I'll start with the lead up to that, because the end of Legion was kind of a weird time, because we were in Tomb of Sargeras together, and that's where the story kind of left off the previous episode. And Kilma and Taurus, the game looked really exciting, the raid looked really good, and we wanted to get back together, but mostly I actually went to Jay, because I was only an officer at the time, and Jay was the raid lead, or the raid lead and GM, and I said, hey Jay, can I bring a bunch of people into Psy, and can I start raiding in Psy? And Jay was like, sure, why not? Let's get back together. And I was like, oh, that's not exactly what I meant, but sure, let's do it. And so we kind of got back together, and that was when I think we had, 12 people total, and we were just like, we fucking crushed normal, and then we had a little bit of strain at the end of Heroic, and then we went through Heroic, and we just kind of were sitting there with 12, and we're like, what do we do? And I think that's when we found the Dirty Rat gang, some of those guys, and we did that. Does that sound about right, Jay?
Yeah, when did you say abouts that was?
So it was probably 2 weeks into that last patch of the start of Antorus, because I remember.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, because when we had seen it, I was like, wow, Argus is so good. We had 12 people, 15 people, somewhere in that range online. I had a bunch of friends that had just come to the game that wanted to start raiding again. And that was the push of me being let's just go fucking raid. And we'll bring a bunch of my shitty friends and we'll fill roles. And we just kind of threw it together. Yeah,
that was also around the time that Ben joined us for the first time. And, or at first I was Prot Pally tanking with Brian, and Ben eventually would watch either me streaming or look at logs and be like, dude, just stop, you're doing it all wrong. And he'd super
stand aside.
Because, he's a very knowledgeable Prot Pally. He knows what he's talking about. And so it's just yeah.
That is the one
that was around that time.
That's the one incredible thing about Ben when he was around is every single fight, at the end, he would parse a 95. And it was weird because it wasn't oh, he has a 93 here, and then there's a 97 here, and those two together make him 95. It's literally every fight is an exact 95. And I was sitting there thinking, this guy is the most the most consistent person I have ever seen as far as just performing well across the board. But he never ever did any worse or any better, which was incredible.
One of the only tanks I know of that's ever gone into a fight and went, all right, this boss hits really hard. Do I need defensives? Right. Yes. Okay, offensive trinkets.
Oh,
there's a reason he got 95 damage parses. Dude did a lot of damage.
Yeah. Okay, so around that time, because again, you were in the GM position, so you had more conversations with them. So that was when, gosh, who was it at the time that was doing most? Yeah, I think you were actually doing most of the recruiting.
Yeah, that was a dark time for Jay.
Rats. Oh yeah, very dark time. But that's when you found the Dirty Rats boys. We brought them in, and we had a conversation with them. I think it was Kurdabi, I think it was Necro, and it was it Orstag? Was it the three of them, or was it other people? I can't remember.
No, there was more than that. It was Necro, Orstag, Kurdabi, Nev was there.
Niffin?
Niffin was there, yeah. Oh, Niffin's the third person we weren't thinking about earlier when we were talking about. As well as fuck, I forgot his name. DK
Skid.
Didn't know how to play.
Skid.
Skid. Thank you. Skid. Yeah, Skid was one of their tanks, and Orstag was the other. And that's why they were really looking to do a merger, because Orstag was let me deeps, because he was really good damage. And then we very quickly realized we'd rather have Orstag tank than Skid, to put it nicely. But
which became basically our best tank setup. Was Ben and Orstag was a fantastic tank setup.
Yeah.
The two of them meshed really well together as well, which is something that's really rare in tanks, especially meeting that early.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Probably the most important thing about the tanks too is they have to get along.
Right.
Yeah, so let's see, we grouped up with them. I think the first week that we joined with them, we got all the way to, I think it was Coven, and then we got stuck because they had to learn the fight, but I'm pretty sure that was as far as they had gotten before. I can't remember. It was either Coven or Aggramar. It was one of the two. And they were like, holy shit, this is great. And then we were still short a few, because I think with that group we had 17. That's also when we, like, LFG met boats. But yeah, it was what was it, 1 week or 2 weeks of Heroic, and then we, like, went in with, like, 16 people and killed Garathi Worldbreaker. Was like, oh shit, this is happening.
Yeah. That's how we start our tiers, is shorthanded.
Yeah. What does that mean?
That was how we start our tiers, is shorthanded.
Yeah.
Hopefully we change that in the future.
Right.
Yeah, we'll get to that, I'm sure, but I'm over Shadowlands. We don't start shorthanded.
Oh, I know.
I'll be heartbroken if we do.
Yeah, and then let's see.
But,
so we were all there for that. We had Kurdabi as an officer. Who was the other officer that we had for a while? Wasn't it Orstag? Or who was it?
I think it was Mag, actually.
Was it?
Because I think it was only Kurdabi that was an officer from that group that came.
Yeah. I thought we had 2. So it was you, Jay, and me, and then it was Kurdabi, and I swore there was one other person. No, it wasn't Orstag. I don't think it was Orstag. But I thought we had one other officer from their side.
I'm pretty sure it was just Kurdabi.
Okay, might have just been Kurdabi then.
Yeah, because I think everybody else was like, I just want to show up and kill bosses. Like, I don't want to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Kurdabi was also quite the character. I guess we'll bring it up now because there were some people that were in our guild asking about it when we showed them the episode 0. Jay, what can you tell us about the padding on one ad story when we were doing Mythic ENR? That was fucking fantastic.
Let me preface this with Kurdabi's a nice guy. He is a nice guy. Like most people, and this is a common human trait we all share, most of us, unless you're a robot like Meeps, who's got faulty hardware and needs a software update. But if you generally are excited about something or you're working towards something, people tend to get kind of tunnel vision. And I don't mean that in the general WoW sense where they are focusing on damaging the boss so much that they kind of neglect mechanics, but rather when you get to a point where you're doing something, if somebody fucks up, you kind of tunnel on the fact that maybe they made a mistake or whatever, and you're not aware of socially how you're coming across. So that been said, that's my nice way of saying he was socially retarded. So really nice guy. I actually still like him, still a nice guy.
About a month ago, he came back into Discord when Orstag did and Necro did, and I actually went off and played a little Call of Duty Battlegrounds with him. It was actually really fun.
I think he's like contemplating coming to Shadowlands and like trying out or whatever to see if.
I think he said enhancement, so that'd be fun to have a shaman around.
Yeah, and I mean, well, 2 because there'll be Nev as well. But yeah, I mean, point is, like, I'll be happy to have him around. There's no bad blood there or whatever. But this is a story in Size history, and it's funny. So hopefully, if he ever hears this, he takes it with a grain of salt that we all do and laugh about it because it was a really funny point in our history.
Right.
That being said, we were working on Mythic, and so we got to ENR. If you're not familiar with the fight, basically it's think of like the worst like tower defense map layout that you've ever seen. It was like that. So you had 3 spawn areas, ads would spawn, you'd have to kill them in a certain speed or order. If they ever got to the boss area where ENR is, they would start damaging the boss, and that's when, if that boss died, you would lose the encounter. As long as you made it through that, without ENR dying, you're good. Mm-hmm. So, part of the wave spawning, they spawn at one point, and then they'll split, and there'll be 2 spawn points, and then they'll split again. So there's 2 at one, and like 2 mobs coming out for another. So at a certain point, you do have to split the raid. So
I just want to jump in here real quick.
Easier for callouts and stuff. Go ahead.
This is what happens when Jay tries to explain any boss fight. This is how it goes.
Okay, yeah, I'll skip the summary. So
nice.
as far as call outs go, I was in one spot, he was in the other. So I would call out where our group is going, he would call out where his group is going. 10 people in my group, 10 people in his. Simple, easy, get through it. So I'm off doing my thing with my group. I'm like, okay, we're going to kill this, then we're going to meet up with the other group. And all I hear is, Zach, what the fuck are you doing down there? Dude, get away from that. Like, stop patting on a single fucking mob, dude. And then Zachary says, what are you talking about? And then Kardabi says, do you want to take this downstairs? And Zach, it's Zach. Anybody that knows him knows that this is definitely going to be the response that he came up with, goes, well, fucking, let's go.
Let's do this.
And they're just, in the Discord, it was completely silent. You hear the doo-doo from like someone leaving the channel, and he's just in the lower chat by himself for like 15 seconds, where we're just like, what's happening? Why did we wipe? What's going on?
And Kardabi didn't move channels. That was just Zach being like, let's go. So he moved channels to a different channel. Kardabi didn't move. It was really awkward. And about 15 seconds later, like, Zachary comes back and he goes, oh, I guess we're not going downstairs then. And ever since then, do you want to take this downstairs has become a guild meme.
Which we have
but it
dozens.
all started from that. Oh, yeah, we have stories for days. And hopefully I'm not the one to tell every single one of them, because then they'll be like stories for years. But, yeah, that was the origination of that meme within the guild, and in my opinion, probably one of the funnier ones, because ultimately, while probably not handled well in a guild managerial sense, having an officer be like, you want to take this downstairs? Probably not handled well. But the one thing I will say is, after that happened, like within seconds of that happening, not a single person in the raid group was like sitting there like, this is awkward. Like, literally everybody was laughing their balls off and or tits. So it was hilarious, well needed in the middle of Prague, but you could tell both of them were upset.
It was funny after the fact too, because I looked at the logs to figure out like what the fuck was going on, like why they were yelling at each other. And it turned out that Kardabi had made the call to like move part of his team up to the higher platform, taking like a little jump pad up. And Zachary was there beating the shit out of the one last ad that was alive. And like everyone else had already left. So like it would have come down to it later, it would have come to bite us in the ass in that poll. But he stayed down there, was killing the ad, and that's why he was pissed off, was because he didn't move when he had called it, but he was doing the right thing. It was such a fucking clown fiesta. And afterwards,
he's patting on one ad.
Yeah.
And it was probably like a Freudian slip on the word that he chose, like patting on one target.
Yeah.
But his call out, while probably correct due to the strategy, like, you have to kill those mobs and then run up. And at the time, mobs were spawning, so you had to get the group up there to deal with them. I get that. But also, the mobs had to die. And if they didn't die, they would make all the way to ENR, and we'd have to clean it up later or let that mob hit ENR. So, in that situation, he had to make a call. He did, and probably chose the wrong words. Patting on a single target is fantastic. But he probably should have said something like, just let it go and get up here and finish these or whatever.
So if anyone in the guild now has heard us say, you want to take us downstairs, and a bunch of like 7 or 8 of us laugh, that's why. It's fucking hilarious moment. One of the golden moments. So let's see. Then we went to Old Deer afterwards, because we after that reform, and we did really well in Mythic, we got up to Coven. Like, I think it was like 2 weeks left until BFA were like, fuck it, we're just not even going to go. There's no point.
Right.
Then we started Old Deer. Then Old Deer was kind of a fucking firebomb. This BFA launch was just not great. In fact, I think that's a pretty good topic for today, actually, is what have our thoughts been about this last expansion as a whole, BFA, all this corruption, essences. I guess it's not my place to start. What you want? One or two of you want to take the floor?
I'll let me start.
Well, yeah. Man, and I was excited for this expansion, like, really excited. And it burned me hard. I remember the beginning of BFA, in Old Deer, I was playing my druid as my main at the time. I was playing a balanced druid, and I was one of the people. We had there were 3 or 4 of us that would clear the board of world quests every time they reset. Yeah.
Yep, I was in that squad.
We even got the Alliance Slayer because we pushed to 120 so quickly, and just started. Yeah, go ahead, go for it.
Okay, no, I actually got to talk about this because when I was me and Niffin found this out, we fucking lost our minds. There was a achievement that you could get called Alliance Slayer, and it was when you were in either zone, was kill 10 Alliance, and then you would get a marker on you, and you'd get a quest. And the quest would be kill 10 more Alliance, but you were marked on everyone's minimap, so all the Alliance would come flock to you. We got there so quick that we were bullying people as they were leveling. And when we first got Alliance Slayer, I had it in my inventory, and I was like, oh, guys, I just got this quest that says kill 10 more. And Niffin said, hey, can you share that? And I was like, I don't think so, but I'll try. Lo and behold, they patched it later, but you were able to share that quest. And we had, I think it was like we had 33 people in the guild, and we were zoning people in and out of raid groups to share the quest if they died so they could get the quest so everyone would have the Alliance Slayer title that would go with it. Man, we were up till like 4 a.m. most nights just in raid groups, just like, oh yeah, here, have your alt, have Alliance Slayer, and we'd share it, and then we'd go mob a fucking flight point with like 30 people and just decimate them while they were leveling. It was phenomenal. That was so much fun, but so broken at the time.
Right.
Sorry for the tangent.
No, yeah, I remember that too. Like
top 3 moments in this entire expansion to put it in perspective.
It's just griefing Alliance players and getting everyone their Alliance Slayer title. But yeah, we pushed hard, and that was also one of the pitfalls that we've learned from going into BFA was our roster, like you said, was like 33. We had a huge roster going into BFA, which was a mistake. And it came from us never having a large roster before, so we didn't know when to stop recruiting. And
I think, if I can interject, part of that, though, is when we were recruiting, we started months before BFA. We kind of set our goal, what we wanted, and we didn't have anything where we could check players beforehand. We couldn't go to, previous tier or whatever because I think the pre-patch had already been done or whatever. So it was pretty much like if you're interested and you could show logs that you're a good player, then we would just take you. Yeah. So we show up to first raid night with 33.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like you can't check people if they're good, really, or if they're going to be a good fit until you're there, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we lost a lot of people just from not. They showed up first night and then never again, which would have been fine if that was the only way we lost people. But we ended up losing down under 20 again through various reasons, but. That was part of the problem.
Was my fault. 100%.
I mean,
feels bad.
We all share the blame in that. We were the guild leadership.
Well, no, but specifically the reason why we lost a really good resto druid is because at the time I was completely unwilling to play anything but resto druid, and I was like, I'm gonna heal, and then this really good package of a rogue plus resto druid apt, and we're like, well, we're heal on fullers. So, yep, we're full on healers right now. So, but you can boomkin if you want, and she was, a good boomkin, but she wanted to heal, and ultimately, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna heal. Sorry, and we don't have a spot for you unless you want a boomkin, and they were fine with that for a little while, but then eventually, they were like, well, we want to play what we actually want to play, so no. We're leaving. And it's like,
Big Fish Bomb, if you're out there, come back. We love you. You were a good guy. That was another hilarious moment.
The worst part was how long was it later? Like maybe 3 weeks later, I ended up switching to Boomkin for the rest of the tier.
Yeah.
So that's on me. I should have just been like, okay, yeah, I don't care what I play. I'll go Boomy. You can do your thing, and we'll have a better comp for it. And not potentially lose 2 people.
Weren't we also raiding 3 nights a week? Like, we were a lot more hardcore.
We were raiding. Yeah. And it was weird because we weren't getting, primarily because of the problems with the roster and not having like the best team going into it, like a solidified 25-man roster, like it, as if like we do now. Like when we got into that tier, I felt like we were really underprepared, which was like really awkward to be put in that position. On top of which, Gahoon was just a piece of shit of a fight, so Heroic was taking forever as well.
Well, I think part of that though also goes to the fact that we couldn't check some of the players, right? So we could only go with a certain amount of, certain people to check to see if they would be good or whatever. So then the others would be sitting, and if you join a guild and you're like, I'm going to try out with this guild, and then you end up sitting like most of the 2 weeks of your trial, you're like, well, they don't want me then. So like it was really hard to balance that because you can only fit 20 people in the raid and you got 33. And we know what we have in 12 people, so we can only check 8 at a time. So yeah, it was complicated.
Yeah.
Sorry, Meeps, keep going.
And then Azerite armor. Oh, the big switch from sets to Azerite armor, and no master loot. Now we're all personal loot. These were not very popular decisions among raiders in our position. For me personally, I didn't really mind missing out on master loot. To me, it saved us time instead of after every boss, like having to dole out every piece, go through every person and decide who should get each piece. But man, Azerite armor, it really punished people that weren't willing to spend hours doing WoW chores, which was most people coming off of...
Or Mythic Plus at the time.
Right.
Well, to talk about Azerite armor for a minute, get your guys' opinion. Azerite armor at the beginning of the expansion, if you weren't there, if you didn't play it, was even worse because like the traits were locked by the AP grind. So it was, you had to find the Azerite you wanted, plus you had to have ridiculous amounts of hours farming AP world quests and running dungeons over and over to get like that little amount more islands. But like I remember when I was on my shaman, I killed Vectus, and it dropped a Azerite shoulders, and was like, okay, I can put these on, and I put them on, but I was only like level 36 in my necklace, so I could only get one trait. And so I was like, well, my item that's 15, 20 item levels lower is better because I have 3 traits in it, or 4 traits in it. And it was just like the most corrupt bullshit system when it first came out. It was so bad. It was so bad.
Despite that, the method of gaining was much better than it is right now.
True.
At least in my opinion. Like right now, the only way you can get Azerite armor is from raid, battlegrounds, world quest, but even that is capped at 450, I think. So realistically, if you want a good piece of Azerite armor, like 470 or let's say mythic tier level, like you have to kill a mythic boss that drops it, or buy it from the vendor for 20,000 of the currency or whatever.
Which is what 5 weeks, 6 weeks of just
for 4? One piece.
Or you can random it. But
or you can roll the dice.
But now
you might get it in one, but
most classes have their the traits that are just far and away the best. So you can't really random it unless you have like a 450, like you have some blue Azerite piece. That's the only time like you could consider randoming. But
because if you've got one trait that's the best for you and there's like 6 shoulders, I mean, you're gonna take a 1 in 6 chance. That's rough. But at least back then you could get them from Mythic Plus. I don't know why they removed that.
That was dumb as well.
Let them drop from Mythic Plus. That's fine, because then at least I'll know I have to target for, Whispers of the Damned or whatever. Let's say it drops out of lower mecha. Like, okay, I've got to run lower mecha over and over and over on a 15 so that I can get 460 Azerite shoulders. Because gearing up for my Shadow Priest, that was the biggest pitfall for me. I could run a dungeon 40 times until I get one item. I've done it.
Which you did have to.
I did. On my mage, I had to run Mechagon 26 times or something to get my bracers. The point is, I'll always be able to run the same dungeon over and over and over and over and over to get an item that I want, especially if I can, convince some of my friends to be like, hey, let's get 4 of us together, join an LFG queue with the title, bring us a Mechagon key, and we'll just smash them out all day long. I have no problem doing that. But like not having Azerite there was no way you could gain it aside from raid boss or random chance at the end of the week by spending your currency.
Yeah.
It was the hardest thing. That's why, my damage sucked for, like 6 or 7 weeks after switching because I couldn't get Azerite. It didn't matter what my item level was. Azerite locked everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Still salty, sorry.
The essences.
So I played a lot in Eternal Palace, and even when we took a break, which we took a break partway through our old year from Psy, and we all kind of just did our own things or people stopped playing, I went to Resistance, got the Cutting Edge for Gahoon, played with them a little in Battle Desire lore, had some real life stuff that came up, and then came back for Eternal Palace with them. The essences at the time weren't that bad because most of them were a 2 to 3 week grind. It was already the start of Eternal Palace, so everyone was already actively doing the content, so it made sense. But not having a catch-up mechanic later was really rough for a lot of people. But during the time, essences I thought were actually really interesting power creep. I actually really like essences.
The fact that the best rating essence came out of PvP.
Okay, look, so which essences were viable for which class? Yeah, they're a little bit skewed maybe. Some of them could have been a little toned down, or maybe they could have changed the places for them. But when essences were like, at the time when they had just fresh came out, I thought it was actually pretty reasonable, if I'm being completely honest. Now how it is it's a pain in the ass to get them, because doing, a bunch of PvP matches to get a 300 DPS upgrade for your convention or your conflict and strife rank 3, that's pretty rough, especially if you don't have PvP experience. It takes a long time, or it takes like a full week when it's like the double battleground XP or whatever. But like when they were around, they were actually really, really cool. And it felt meaningful again, actually, on another note, to gain AP to get that 4th slot where you could have the last minor. So that was like a really big breakpoint people were pushing for at the time. Yeah. So like a lot of competitive people doing a lot of AP, doing a lot of islands, get that last slot, and then they kind of just stop doing those. They finished their essence grind, and it was actually enjoyable at the time. But now, knowing it's a different time and it's a pain in the ass for a lot of people to come back to the game, really, really difficult not having a catch-up mechanic that's really easy for people to have access to them with.
Right.
Yeah, I hate the fact that not just Conflict and Strife, but even Blood of the Enemy, which I think it's Blood of the Enemy, the one that gives you the stacking crit thing.
Yep.
As a Shadow Priest, which, rest in peace, Shadow Priest 2020. For me, the spec is dead. But
everyone else.
The thing about that is, like, Blizzard knows haste crit is all Shadow Priests want. So they lock your Abyss Essence behind PvP, which is annoying because it's obviously the best in slot. And what happens if you have a player like me, for example, that hates PvP? Like, I'm not against World PvP. I play with War Mode on because, it's part of the game. But I'm not going to join a Warsong Gulch if I can avoid it. If I can do anything else aside from PvP, I'm going to do that. So why would you force players to go do content that they perhaps don't want to do? To me, that sounds like a terrible decision to make that design choice. Like, you're saying if you want this, you have to do these other things. You might not enjoy part of those aspects of the game. And if you look at my account, I've barely PvP'd when you consider, rating and Mythic Plus. I've got like billions of hours more into that than I do PvP, like lifetime over my account, because I just don't enjoy it. So the fact that I'm forced to play this aspect of the game that I don't enjoy is stupid.
And it's not like they had no idea going into it that this might happen. That was a big part of the feedback from Mr. Pandaria with the Legendary Cloak. You had to do PvP. I forgot what exactly, but you had to go into a battleground. I think you had to get like 10 wins or something in a certain battleground. But people hated that. And Blizzard realized that, and I don't know if they relaxed that requirement or took it out completely. But they knew that going in, they had the experience going in. Don't cross your PvE with your PvP in terms of power. Just don't do it. For the most part, that's 2 entirely separate ecosystems. But here we are.
It's going to be interesting to see how that's going to work in the upcoming expansion, which is something we will dive into probably later tonight or another podcast, is I'm pretty sure they're changing the rewards that you get from PvP. It's going back to like a vendor system, right? So that'll make it a lot more accessible for people to get the loot that they want. So that might entice more people to go do PvP, which in that case, you're then again mixing the two environments.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It's fine from not a power standpoint. If they come up with some way to entice people to do PvP that doesn't increase your power, I mean, they've already got things that do that, from like mounts and titles and transmogs and certain gear that's for PvP. They've already got stuff to entice people into doing PvP for certain stuff already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But now we're at the point in BFA where your alts, if you've got rank 3 on a certain essence, you can buy it for currency on your alt, which for the people that have played through, like haven't let their sub lapse because BFA was really awful for a while, the people that have kept playing and kept up and did everything while it was current, sure, you've got your rank 3s pretty much across the board just from playing the game. But people coming back have to farm all that shit, even though they might have left because they had to farm it in the first place.
Yeah. Like going in and being like, oh, I need to get Memory of Lucid Dreams from an old raid. When you think about that old raid, unless you're a very specific class that's using one of those broken trinkets, there is no reason to step in that raid anymore. So it's like, oh, you're telling me I have to go run that raid on Heroic and or Mythic for like 5 weeks to get my rank 3? Like, I don't want to do that. But that if you want to be at the echelon, the top echelon of your class and perform, sometimes people will say, well, you need this essence. And so people need to go do it, which I think is flawed, at least for a catch-up standpoint. When I was around and it was, current, everyone had it because everyone was raiding and everyone would just get it after a couple weeks. But, going forward and being like, oh, you need these things, it just makes it so much more difficult. They really should have had a different system in play where you don't have to obtain it, but maybe you can buy it or something. I don't know. It also then has the gap of PvP and PvE mixing that people don't like.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is coming from the perspective of 3 mainly PvEers. Like, we do raiding, we do Mythic Plus. None of us really do much in the way of PvP. And I'm sure people on the PvP side of the fence feel the same way. Like, they don't want to have to go to this raid to get Memory of Lucid Dreams if it's best for their class in Arena.
Yeah,
well,
like a good example is like Kiki, the raider that we have. She didn't love PvE beforehand, but because of how PvP is now, she felt entitled to go do PvP or PvE. I mean, to get essences and to get things for her PvP setups to make sure that she could, get her gladiator or get whatever rank she was in PvP before, because it's required. So it's not just PvE needs like the PvP. It's the PvP needs PvE as well. So it goes both ways. And for some people, it's really irritating.
Right.
Yeah, but in the case of some people, like, we've talked with Kiki about this before, and I believe she said something like that she had never really liked PvEing before, and then she raided with us for a bit, and now she likes raiding or whatever. And now, like, she's in our raid team, everything's going great, in that regard. Like, she's having fun and all that, but she still loves the PvP aspect and everything. And that's fine if it's just a way to expose a player to a certain method of the game that maybe they hadn't played before. But the part about that is it shouldn't be mandatory, because if it's about introducing a player to a different aspect that maybe they hadn't considered, that's one thing. This was less of an introduction and more of a, if you want this, you have to go do this content. And I'm sorry if you hate it, but you have to do it.
And you have to
for those people that maybe they didn't enjoy it before, but now you have to dip your toes in a little bit. That's fine. Blood of the Enemy, you needed before it was nerfed, like 100,000 honor from Battlegrounds or whatever, and then it was reduced to like 30k or something like that. It still took me 3 weeks of constant dungeons all weekend in order to get my rank 3. It was fucking stupid. I can't understand that design choice of, forcing somebody to do that. Because if I'm supposed to get rank 3, If I hate PvP, then I'm going to feel the way I do right now. If I'm somebody who just, oh, I've never really tried that aspect, and then it turns out I don't like it, well, then I'm shit out of luck. And if it turns out that I do like it, then yay, they've got another PvP player. But it didn't feel like an introduction. It felt like, you have to do this.
Yeah.
That is all.
And it was like you said.
Thanks,
I think
Blizzard.
dipping our toes in would have been fine. And after the nerf, even 30,000 honor, it was doable, but it was still pretty high. I think 10,000 would have been fine. Like that would have been dipping your toes in to see if you like this content. And 30,000, even 30,000 is kind of overkill. Like I dipped my toes in, 3 hours ago. I'm still just grinding this stuff that I don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from you, who quite literally a lot of the time lives in this game, that's quite a big statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now,
okay, so let's see. Go ahead.
The big daddy, corruptions. We've gone over Azerite. We've gone over essences. Now we get on to corruptions. I think we should just take it easy. Go with the cloak first. How do you guys feel about the intro, the quest, getting the cloak, leveling the cloak? How did you guys feel about that?
So I feel.
First,
sure, go ahead. No, go right ahead.
I fucking loved. Yeah, you probably didn't think I was going to say that.
No.
The cloak quest, the visions, the introduction to all of that, I fucking loved it. It was awesome. Great storyline, for the most part. Very interactive, a lot of fun. The introduction to actually visions and like N'Zoth is starting to drive you crazy and all that stuff, I thought was like 10 out of 10 storytelling as far as an MMO goes. I mean, obviously, certain companies can do it better, like, Bethesda or whatever in a single-player RPG, totally story-focused game. But in an MMO, you can only do so much. I thought it was phenomenal. Probably some of the best work Blizzard's done in a long time since... I don't know. I'm not going to make a controversial statement yet. However, that's about all the good news I have for it. The other bits, I fucking hate. The corruption resistance going up every week, that's a nice way to help out the, raid groups that, like ours, maybe had a late start. So the corruption is making up for the fact that we had the late start and, we're not limit, so we can't obviously kill it as quickly. So corruption's a way to give you a crutch to get over that. I like that. That's fine. And having resistance go up every week means you can use more and more corruption. So on a weekly basis, even though you're not getting drops, you're still incrementally getting better at playing that character, or at least your character power curve is going up. That's cool too. The fact that some classes are so reliant on certain specific essences, or not essences, corruption.
Essences too.
Actually, yeah, but since we're past essences, like looking at corruptions though, as a shadow priest, all I care about is expedient and severe. I need 5 severe, 4 expedient is like the optimum, but like 2 patches before that, it was like 4 and 4 with 2 gushing wounds, and now gushing wounds has been nerfed into the ground, so you've got to replace that. Had they have included Echoes of Nyalotha, or whatever it's called, from the beginning, that would have been a fine way to go about it.
Right.
The whole random chance thing from the beginning was fucking stupid. Just give us a much slower way to farm it out, and I would have been fine with that. But the way that it's implemented now is at least better than what it was. But as far as the cloak and gaining all that and making that progression, I really, really enjoyed it.
On a topic of like, I wish those systems were there for the beginning kind of discussion, when it came to, I remember when they released the information that if you did a horrific or a vessel of horrific visions, the reward would guaranteed have corruption. Like that was the first like instance of they were doing the catch-up mechanic, and even that I was like, this is the best thing ever. It's still so fucking random, but I love it. This is so much better. And then they just added the vendors. Like, what was the point of getting it guaranteed at the end of the vessels? Like, that just became obsolete 15 seconds later. I don't think I've ever had one good piece of gear from the visions, like outside of just buying all the corruptions that I needed anyway. But God, the corruption system. The only thing that I can say I don't like about it, because I like feeling powerful and I like pushing the weirdest builds that your class can do, because Elemental Shaman had, which is what I'm playing now, has had 2 different varieties of build. It started off with like, oh yeah, you can run the sweet Ascendance build, and if you get a couple corruptions with some haste and some crit, it's all good. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, we can just stat crit now, and now our crits every attack, so now we just don't cast one of our primary abilities anymore, and we drastically change everything, use different talents and Azurite and everything. And that is problematic as far as a game design standpoint, I feel. But I don't hate corruption as much as I used to, only because I think it's fun to feel the power creep. But what I don't like about it is how much it has defined like a meta, or it has enabled some classes. My best examples would be Fire Mage, Ret Paladin, and Frost Death Knight. Because like before the tiers, like everyone was playing Unholy because it would sim better. But now if you can get every single piece of corruption, Frost DK is just way fucking above everything else. So every single Death Knight now is a Frost Death Knight. Mages, you can get so much mastery and crit from just raw sources that you just do a mastery build, and all of a sudden you're doing hundreds of thousands of damage and no class can keep up. And it's just being able to have a build that's just like, oh, I'm a mage, but I have to be a fire mage because now I have to have a certain corruption build because it's just so much better. I feel like it's a poor game design standpoint to force players with so much power creep that it just breaks a class. It just absolutely destroys a certain thing and makes it so brokenly overpowered that you feel like you have to use it.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, to add a somewhat related note, Niffin, if you watch this, you're going fire for Carapace. Sorry, buddy.
Feels bad, man.
He's been fired before. He'll be fine.
What are your thoughts about corruption, Meeps? You've been a little quiet about it.
I'll start with the cloak. I actually really enjoyed it the first time. As you guys know, I play every class. I have every class at 120, and I have the cloak on 7 characters at varying levels. And the first time, I loved it. The second time, I was like, man, this run's a little long. It's a lot to do. The third time, I was like, Jesus. And so forth until I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I got my 7. I'm done. I'm definitely not going to raid on any of my other characters ever. So with the cloak, yeah, I like Jay. I really loved it the first time. And I like the idea of gaining more corruption resistance every week as a really slow but inevitable power creep. Although we're at the point where we're almost able to attach 20 corruption to every piece that can take corruption and still have under 40 corruption. So I don't know if there'll be any more power creep here pretty soon. We'll see. Or
maybe that's when we start wearing Twilight Devs or something.
Right. Or if the pre-patch will probably hit us first before we get to the point where that question really comes up.
You know, as a funny side note, I always said when we started this tier, I want to do a raid right before the pre-patch where everyone just wears like 100 corruption and see if we can even kill bosses on normal, or see if we just get killed by our corruptions. Right. Like stupid amounts of infinite stars and Twilight Devastation just going off, just melting bosses. I think it'd be so fun.
See if we can one-shot Rathion.
The same thing I said when you originally brought it up. I agree, but let's do it on Mythic.
Right. See if we can one-shot Rathion with everyone's proccing infinite stars at the same time.
Oh, God.
So
time to build my infinite stars set, I guess.
Who was it, by the way? I think it was Niffin, where I was like looking at his logs. He had like a 99% on Mott. And it was because he had an infinite stars proc for 1 million damage crit, which was like 12% of his overall damage. Something stupid like that.
Here's a question. With 20 people, do you think if we all had infinite stars, like 6 of them, on every single player, you think we could kill Mott before transition?
I don't know. That'd be a hard one. Maybe.
Let's find out.
It'd be luck, but I think it's doable.
Cyboys, challenge issued.
I think... there's no way we could farm up that many echoes in time to get that much infinite stars across the raid.
Yeah, how much are we paying for this to turn into a job?
Right.
Fair.
But when it comes to corruptions,
Half the raid said challenge accepted.
I am I'm pretty vocal about how I do not like people that abuse the system and will run 60, 80 corruption. I think it would be fine if in a non-mythic environment. In a mythic environment where you have to account for yourself moving out of, doing all the mechanics, moving out of everything that can one-shot kill you. And then on top of that, you've got a little dude that'll come chase you out of the blue, and you've only got so many ways to deal with him. So people will end up using their class toolkits to deal with this thing from beyond, which is fine in a non-mythic raid environment, because in a mythic raid environment you're using the same tools to avoid encounter mechanics. So I don't know why people think that you just have the tool up at all times. Oh yeah, I'll just handle the guy when it comes. Sometimes you'll get a double spawn while you're trying to move toward them to get out of an AoE mechanic. It drives me crazy whenever I see a wipe to someone getting hit by their thing from beyond.
Well, one of the things that's kind of frustrating on that same note is I've had the personal experience of being like, well, if I run this little bit more corruption, I'll bring more damage to the group. But the trade-off is how much do you actually have to deal with it, and how much does it screw with you? Like, as a shaman, I can just Ghost Wolf, I can Slow Totem, stun it, I can Thunderstorm it away, I can Frost Shock and run. But, like, at the end of the day, even though I'm getting more damage and more potential from my class based on corruptions, it's usually just not worth it anyway. Like, corruption just sucks in that system because the benefit is being a little bit better, and the downside is just fuck all. It's just so bad.
You have to spend on top, so you get that extra damage. Say you're up to 50 corruption. You get that extra damage from having more corruption, but then you lose some of that damage dealing with that corruption, like either running from it, slowing it, stunning it, and that's coming from someone that played a hunter a lot of the time. I tried 60 corruption. For a while I capped it at 59 just because I knew I could feign death. Like, if I popped one of the little dudes, then I feigned death and he just would wander around in circles. It was awesome. I didn't really have to worry about it. But then I would get up as soon as I pop feign death, stand back up, and a second guy would pop up. Then I have to use my cloak. Then my cloak is on a 3-minute cooldown. I can't do that again for another 3 minutes. I have to handle this little dude chasing me if it comes up again. And that's whenever I figured, all right, the time I'm spending dancing around with these little bastards, the time I'm spending slowed, like trying to get to my next target because I'm got this massive slow on me from the corruption, the time I'm running out of my eye that's killing me because I can't take that much damage while taking raid-wide damage, for like 39 is the highest that you can reasonably raid with consistently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all agree on that. I think a lot of the community also agrees on that.
Yeah.
On another note, that kind of sucks that none of us are super into the PvP scene. I know from seeing clips that corruption has also plagued and partly in some aspects ruined PvP, like completely. Just walking into PvP and suddenly just getting one shot.
Right.
Like, it's a hard system to balance where it's fun, but man, is it a fucking nightmare when you're thinking about the upper echelons of content or people trying to push for like achievements and things like that, like a certain rating or mythic progression. It really sucks. Like it overall is just a bad system.
Yeah. But then you see videos, we'll see the videos of people getting one shot, but it's not like it happens a whole lot. It's just, well, I just walked in and got destroyed because all these corruptions happen to pop off at the same time. So, is that being is it fine because it happens so rarely? Like, say, 1 in 1,000 matches?
No.
I think it's maybe not fine, but not a major issue. If I could draw that distinction.
I think it's problematic when, let's say it's 1 out of 100. I think that's a bit more reasonable. Like if if 1 out of 100 games you literally just get to automatically win against your opponent in a rated environment where people are trying to push for rank, I feel like that's basically cheating.
Right.
Like saying that like, oh, there's a 1 in 100 chance that like if you're in like an FPS game, for example, like if you were to say, oh, my gun just has a 1 in 100 chance to just one hit kill someone and I'm using an automatic weapon, that doesn't seem fair.
Yeah.
It's just having that in a rated environment is not fair at all. If it's, oh, I was in a battleground with 40 other people and it's unrated and all of a sudden someone one-shot me because of a corruption 1 in 100 chance, someone would still be upset about that, but I think that that's a little bit more reasonable. Right. When you're pushing for rank, it's demoralizing for the player. And then also, I bet it makes some people feel like, well, if I'm not running this, why am I playing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I feel like it's also important that we distinguish that, or make the distinction, rather, that self-professed, none of us are major PvPers, so all of this take with a grain of salt, because we're kind of talking out of our ass on this specific point.
Personally, I've never made it above 2K, so...
I'm at 1.6, man. You're higher than me.
Same. My cap was 1.7, like...
Okay, so here's an interesting question. So if, knowing all these systems and everything that's in play, it sounds fairly negative. What's your guys' overall take on BFA as a whole? Because I know that specifically you guys have played a lot longer than me, so I feel like my stance on that is a little bit lessened when I compare it to how much experience I have. Because, I've had another little small point is like, people tell me like world quests are so much different and weird than dailies. I've actually enjoyed world quests more than dailies, mainly because I've had to do so many dailies in Uldir and Eternal Palace, or not the Eternal Palace, the Uldir and Vale area, that I've like seen them and be like, these don't feel as fun or as easy or as intriguing as world quests do. So, I mean, how do you guys rate this expansion in comparison to other ones?
Can't just drop in on a blue mob and destroy it and leave.
Yeah, exactly. Or, go to a place and the objective's clearly laid out instead of I have to go to the same quest giver every single day. It feels more exciting to me to fly out into the world and something's happening. That feels more like an MMO instead of, oh, I go to the quest giver, oh, I have to go and, kill 5 more Mogu statues. Oh boy. Yeah. Oh, when I'm done, I go fly back and I turn it into them instead of just, I flew out in the world and shit was going down and I stopped it and now it's better. And to give my stance really quick, I think that this expansion, mainly in comparison to Legion, has been a lot of disappointment as far as the systems that have been in play go. But because I only have that much excitement, I think that the rating in this expansion was actually pretty good. That's my take, at least. As much information as I can give. How do you guys feel about BFA as a whole?
Jay, you want to take this one first? Okay, I'll take it.
You want? I can take it. It's amazing.
As a whole, I guess I'd have to compare it with each other expansion that I've played before, and it's pretty well established that there's popular expansions and unpopular expansions, and I have a different point of view, or I have a different take with some expansions than most people. Like Warlords was a bad expansion, says most people, because it was a pretty dead there wasn't much to do, but the rating was some of the best rating the WoW's ever had. And me being the player that I am, I play all the classes, I dabble in everything, and Warlords was the most open to that, so I could just log into my garrison, farm up a whole bunch of gold, and then switch to my next character. 5 minutes, farm up my garrison, make my gold. Next character, farm up garrison, make gold. And there was stuff to do outside if you're an achievement hunter. If you wanted to get mounts and transmogs and that sort of thing, you could hunt down rares. There's still rares that I haven't gotten, even though I spent a lot of time hunting them down because there wasn't anything else to do in Warlords. But anyway, I'm just trying to give my point of view of I have a different experience with most expansions than most people. And BFA is probably bottom 3 of what I've played, just because of all of the systems. Starting with the Azerite gear, I was never a fan. It's better now than it was, obviously, because reasons we have already talked about. but I miss sets. I'd say it's better than Cataclysm, though. Cataclysm was, it was right from the outset. It wasn't very good. They had a not great raid, and most of like where I'm comparing against is raids and what it was like day to day. Rise, you never really experienced dailies like we have because dailies pretty much stopped existing when Legion started. World Quest took over for dailies. I actually, one of my favorite things was daily hubs. The Molten Front, the Argent Tournament,
Blade's Edge.
See, I didn't really play BC.
Oh, that was the best one.
I did do the Netherwing and Nether Ray those dailies event and Wrath, so they were really easy then.
Well, yeah, because you're a mountain hunter, and
right.
They drop mounts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So now that I've got some comparisons out of the way, there are positives to BFA. Besides the first raid, I've enjoyed all of the raids. Some more than others. Battle of Dazar'alor was really interesting. Like, they really went zany with the raid. I think that has the strangest mechanics and strangest fights, and I really enjoyed that. You know, with the gold boss, even the council boss with the 4, like the switch into different beast forms. And then Jaina, of course, is like, that's an amazing fight. Except when you cheese it now because you overgear and can just mush her face down while she's channeling.
Yeah.
So from a rating perspective, this is probably third best. I'd say Warlords was best, and Mop was second best. And this and Legion. From a rating perspective, which is mostly what I do. And then the other half of the kind of player I am, it's the worst expansion ever for alts. If you play multiple characters, this is hands down the worst expansion. There's no comparison.
Are you including Legion in that?
Yes, even Legion was better than this for alts.
That's the first spicy hot take.
I can prove it. I can prove it just by saying the Mage Tower. The Mage Tower is a way of showing, like, if you could do the Mage Tower, then the alt system was okay. Because you had to have some gear and some ability on an alt to do the Mage Tower. I did 36 Mage Towers. I did every single spec Mage Tower. There's no way if they threw in a spec challenge now, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it on half my characters.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the amount of work that it would take to be able to complete that sort of challenge is extreme.
Well, you know, one of the interesting things, comparing it to Legion had some systems, primarily in the weapons and the AP, but you have to also consider that later in the expansion, like, even come Nighthold, you could finish stacking a weapon to completion in, like, a week. Yep. Like, when I switched from Demon Hunter to Elemental Shaman in Nighthold, it took me, I think, 2 weeks to cap my AP on my weapon, and then that was pretty much, as far as the systems go, that was really it.
Yeah.
In comparison to now, it's Azurite armor, AP, it's, you know, also making sure that you have the best build, all the best corruptions, your cloak is max level.
So right now we've got a triple threat on systems. We've got corruptions, we've got essences, and we've got Azurite.
Yeah.
You have to do you have to like build up all 3 of those. As opposed to just building up the weapon and maybe running some heroic raids for tier pieces in Legion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I think for me, sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, from my standpoint, like me as a player, like I said, probably third best rating expansion and the worst expansion in terms of, you know, playing other characters.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I think I'll echo the playing other characters bit. As anybody who knows me for longer than 30 seconds knows, I main switch about 37 times a tier. And if you're counting, that's 36 specs plus 1. So I definitely get that. I obviously we played in Old Year, and then I basically skipped out 2 tiers and came back just for this tier. So I don't have a full breadth on the rating on this entire expansion. From what I've seen of Desire Lore, it looked fun. From what Old Year we experienced, which was basically 5 of 7 Mythic cleared, or 4 of 7, something like that. That was a ton of fun, and where we're currently at right now with 10 of 12 Mythic in the current tier is a lot of fun. And I think all of the raid fights, for the most part, are you don't have any more patchworks, right? No more fluffy pillows that you got to destroy. There's mechanics involved, and for the most part, the Mythic mechanics in all of these fights are entertaining. Sometimes they're a little bit boring, but for the most part, they all do something special. Carapace is a night and day difference from heroic to mythic. And I mean, I've only made it to phase 2 one time because we only did 3 polls Wednesday night. Meeps would probably know more, but phase 3 is fucking nutty. Like, the room split into fucking quadrants, and you got to use lock gates to get over the thingies that slow you, the pustules that do damage and all that shit. Meanwhile, you're running away from that spreading circle that comes out, plus you got ads chasing you, and then tentacles come down all at the same time. It's a fucking clusterfuck, and it looks hilariously fun. So, obviously, I can't speak on that quite yet because we haven't gotten there to phase 3, but without exception, almost every other boss in the tier and even back in Old Year has been awesome. A lot of fun. I would put this rating at second best, and I've rated in every single expansion except for Mop, as we talked about. I put WoD at number 1. I loved the Warlords of Draenor raids. Terrible expansion. Just as a whole, garrisons were absolute shit. All that stuff. But I'll loop that kind of into the original question, which was like the dailies grind and the world quests and stuff. And I like world quests because they're faster than the old daily hubs. However, the old daily hubs were, you knew what you had to do every day. I knew, like, okay, tomorrow I gotta get up, whatever I'm gonna have to do the Nether Drakes, and I'm going to have to go there. I don't know which 6 quests are going to be up, but I'm going to have to do 6 quests, and I'm going to have to do them. I'm going to have to go there, I'm going to have to do them, and then you're done. We don't know what tomorrow's emissary is going to be. So, you don't know till you log on, and for me, OCD, not knowing something before I get to it is like my nightmare. I would much rather be prepared going into something. So for me, that's just a minor OCD tweak, but it's been much better, aside from, all the borrowed power stuff as well. But the world quests are quicker. I do miss parts of the hubs, but it's fine. I'm not a huge fan of flying. I've always been not a fan of flying. I feel like it takes part of the world away. I understand the argument that no way, it opens up all of the sky, but then you're flying over all this content that you could be riding through. And, think back to your first ride through on your mount, going through Val Shara when you're leveling up in Legion. You get all the trees coming over and shit, and you see the wisps, and you go over the little, hill as you run up to Furion or whatever, Malfurion. It was kind of like a cool moment. Every time you see it, you're just like, yeah, it's kind of cool environment here. You don't get that when you're on a mount. You just land, accept the quest, and fly off. So, setting's kind of important in that regard. So, yeah.
I get what you're saying.
Wishy-washy answer.
And I appreciate how they do it now. I would rather just have flying from the outset. But I understand because of that reason why they're doing pathfinding now. But man, Like I said, as someone that plays all the characters all the time, if I could just save so much time, just swoop in, do it, and swoop out, oh, I'm going to miss flying when it's gone.
I'd be okay with them, whenever they release an expansion, flying, design the game with flying in mind, but put Pathfinder in the game since launch. Make it accessible since launch, so that if you want to, no sleep till flying, and do all the grind and, do all your rep and stuff to unlock it, make it pretty hard, make it a significant grind, but make it possible from release, I'd be okay with that, because people would still have to explore the world and yada, yada, yada. But for those people that really don't give a shit about that, they have to do it enough times until they get Pathfinder, and then they can just go. I'd be okay with that, because they still have to experience that. I mean, you still have to with Pathfinder anyways, but right. I understand the sentiment of, I don't want to have to be not flying for a year before Pathfinder. I can understand how that would turn somebody off. And I also understand how contradictory that is to my previous statement. So,
I think that from an interesting perspective, like being able to go and explore the environment and not being able to fly is really good, because when you're like a year into an expansion, it kind of gets dull and you just want to speed things up, and that's where like the alts come into play. But like I can tell you from my personal standpoint that the first time that I stepped into Najatar when we were doing Eternal Paltrade, getting there and like walking around, that zone was fucking insane, and it was so cool, and all the secrets and everything, and going around and trying to spawn rares, that was all really fun. But by like week 3, I would go to the auction house like a little crack monkey looking for goblin gliders, just like, I need more. I cannot walk in this zone another step. I need to fly to the raid entrance. Please give me more goblin gliders. So it really, also I guess depending on the zone if you want to make that argument, but I think that after a certain amount of time, it's kind of good to have some way to bypass just walking around and have flying. It definitely helps a lot of people, and it also supports having the alts, because having an alt walking through that same quest line for the 6th, 7th time, or in Meeps' case the 12th, 37th time, whatever, it can be pretty annoying, and depending on the zone, it can also be really, really annoying. So I like the fact that it's available. Whether or not you can have it right away, I think it's fine to wait for a while, honestly, as long as it's available at some point, because eventually it's going to get dull. But I mean, even if you can't fly, like getting goblin gliders, there are ways around it, or people will take the easiest way. Like in Legion, getting those emerald wings, that little toy, being able to like fly across the map, that was something that I felt was like mandatory for most people until we got flying. Just sometimes you just want to have it. You want to have access to the easy road, but it definitely, especially on your first character, first playthrough, it's definitely a lot more meaningful to have to walk through the zone and your first set of world quests, walking around and exploring and finding all the things. That's what kind of makes it an MMO, that exploration, that feeling of you're in a giant world, the fun feeling of the unknown, or having to be careful about what's around you. Later, it's it's not as bad, but I think flying is needed. Whether or not you start with it and it's just a stupid hard quest and you can get there in 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know, maybe. But I think that flying is needed at some point, regardless of whenever it is.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not like super committed one way or the other. I could go either way with that. Just in that sense, it was just kind of annoying. But to kind of go back to the original question, though, the daily experience, I feel like right now is much better. I've never felt the pressure to do islands nearly as much as everybody else did. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really island cap ever. Like, how you had to do like 20,000 every week. I did that like 3 times. My neck has never been significantly behind people, and that's including the fact that I've main switched, since, coming back to the tier. How many times? 3, 4? I don't even know. Like Druid, Mage, Priest. 3. But
that's a record for you. I mean, like,
despite that,
golf numbers.
What's that?
That's a record for you.
I know, right? I'm getting, look, next expansion.
And it only took you taking off half the expansion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It would have been 78 otherwise. But, the point is, I've kind of always had a neck around the level of the majority of the raid. Now, don't get me wrong, if we were in limit, it'd probably be bench, because my neck would have been like 15 item level or 15 levels below, the next person or whatever. And I accept that. We're not them. So, the restrictions aren't that intense. But I've made up for it in other ways. So instead of doing the easy islands, because I just don't like islands, they were cool the first time. After that, meh. I've just gotten my AP in other ways. I love Mythic Plus. I will spam 30 Mythic Plus in a day on a weekend if I have to. I'll do 100 a week if I have to. So that's where I've gotten my AP. Significantly less efficient, significantly more time consuming, but for me, significantly more fun. So as long as you make up for it in other ways, I think that's fine. I haven't done an emissary in months. Just never felt the need.
This all sounds like heresy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
burn.
kind of like Garrison. It's optional.
No, it sounds like heresy.
Oh, here's
here's-
Like I do my islands on 2 tunes every week. I do emissaries. If there's a gold emissary, I do it 10 times. But other than that, I do every emissary on the warlock and hunter.
yeah. I still do them on my shaman, and I did them for a while on my pally, but my pally's not my rating tune anymore, so I've stopped doing that. But there was a time where I was doing every single emissary a day and islands every week on both characters just to make sure I would be as high as possible. So yeah, it happens sometimes, and depending on what you want or what you need out of the game, you might have to do that. But
I just do islands because it's mostly painless. It's pretty quick on, my hunter's 480, my warlock's 478. They're both, corrupted out pretty well now. So even if I have 2 people just standing around, they don't take very long to do.
Right.
yeah. Also, just as a quick side note, I feel really weird in comparison to like Legion, because in Legion, a lot of those systems, like the World Quest systems and the dailies and emissaries, they were a lot more rewarding than BFA, which also I think is really, really weird, since these feels like there's so many more systems now, and doing like an emissary and getting like, oh, it's 2,000 gold, cool. And then in Legion, I would go to my little order hall table and be like, oh, well, there's a mission for 5,000 gold right here. Oh, yeah, I'll just do that really quick.
Right?
It feels like the rewards have also kind of slacked back, which makes it feel even less of a priority to, just makes it even feel worse, compounding on top of itself.
And see, you missed out on Warlords, which was the Garrison mission table, which was even more ridiculous than the Legion. They just nerfed it, expansion to expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So I didn't actually technically get into my overall thoughts of BFA, but again, I've really only played 2 expansions at a fairly
Hold
higher
on.
level. Oh,
I'll set you up for this. Hey, Rise, how do you feel about the daily grind in BFA and thoughts on a whole?
Oh, thank you, Jay.
thanks, Jay. Let me tell you. In comparison to Legion, I feel like it's a lot more busy work, or at least it has been when it like the content initially comes out. Like again, like the Essence grind for me at the time wasn't that bad, but knowing now that like if I came back to the game today, in order to be any kind of competitive, I have to go into an old raid for 5 weeks in a row and kill every single boss, and I have to go farm a trinket out of there, and I have to go and do 15 horrific visions to get my cloak to 15. Yeah, it's terrible. So as far as the day-to-day grind and islands, emissaries, all that stuff, it feels a lot worse than Legion was. However, I think the quality of the endgame content in this expansion has been a lot better. I absolutely loved doing Mythic Zool. The boss between Gahoon and Zool was an asshole, and I'd rather never fight him again. But doing Mythic Gahoon, doing Mythic Zool, those fights were awesome. And Feta Devour was like, when we killed that, our entire raid group was like screaming and freaking out because we thought we weren't going to kill it with like 4 people alive. So that was really cool. Doing Battle Desire lore, like just as Meeps had said, some of those fights were incredible. Like the Boam Sandi fight against King Rosticon, that fight was insane when we were doing it on prog. And like the second we got jolted into the second realm and we had no idea what was going on, and we just got murdered in like 3 seconds, and like figuring out exactly what everyone has to do, how we have to set up the gates, and just how much personal responsibility, that was awesome. I love Mechatork only because it was Elemental Shaman's only fight that they've ever performed the absolute best on, but we won't go into that. I actually also really liked the fight before Jaina with the 2 boats and the big elemental. I thought that fight was really cool mechanically, and how you had to control the adds, how you had to burst them down. Your raid had to split almost perfectly in damage. You had to have your healers on top of it. Like there was multiple different places for the raid to move and go. So it was all very coordinated and choreographed. That all was awesome. And then the Jaina fight was amazing. Eternal Palace, the only 2 fights that I really liked in Eternal Palace was the Behemoth, the fish, because it felt much more different than any fight that I had been in, and doing Mythic Zakul, even though I absolutely hated Mythic Zakul because it gave me no loot, and that fight was a giant pain in the ass. But once I really learned how the mechanics work, it was an awesome fight. And then Ny'alotha, I think there's only like 2 bad bosses. I'd say Mott's not very fun, and Xanesh isn't very fun, but Xanesh for obvious reasons, and Mott just because it feels patchworky, but it's really not. So, yeah, I'd say in comparison to like a raiding environment, this expansion BFA was definitely a lot better. Legion, it felt more rewarding to go and do daily things, and they didn't feel as toxic as BFA has felt now with all the systems in place. But the raiding in Legion was still fine. So I think if I had to compare the 2 expansions, I'd say I think Legion is slightly better, only because it's more convenient day to day. But the BFA rating has definitely been top notch, in my opinion.
I think I have a hot take.
Sure.
Go for it.
Xanesh is a good boss fight.
Ooh, just go ahead.
I think so, honestly, I think so too. I enjoy Xanesh, and this is coming from someone who just planked the whole kicking mechanic up until I got it, and now now I haven't missed since I got it. Like I'm like, all of a sudden it clicked. Oh, you kicked the ball. Okay. I don't know what was wrong. How I could manage to. I just was awful with the ball kicking. And then once I got it, I'm like, wow. And it's something I tell Jay every week whenever we go in there with a new crowd. Jay, you can slot me in anywhere because I can do any kick. Because some people have only done like the 1 kick, but I've been first kick, I've been last kick, I've been middle kick on the 3rd set. Like it's all the same to me.
First set, second set, third set doesn't matter to you. You can slot you in anywhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which, and so that just, I kind of get it, like why some people are only like, well, I've never done this kick before, I'm not comfortable with it. I kind of get that because even whenever I had done the kick before, I was screwing it up still. So I kind of get that, but then now it's just something clicked, and I enjoyed that part of the fight, and I like the interrupt timings. Like it's so much coordination. It's a well scripted ballet. I think it's a good fight. Just people need to, pay attention to what they got to do. You have to have your interrupt. You have to have your kick.
I think all of the mechanics inside of it are fine. The only thing that I don't like about it is that same kind of feeling that I got from some of the Legion boss fights, and that's if one person messes up even slightly, everyone loses. And it's not like
of course you think that. You're casual.
Well, okay, listen here, you little shit. But it's not that, if someone messes up, the fight's harder. Because, even that is for, the same thing as, like, if you miss an interrupt, the fight gets harder. It's still possible to win. If you touch the ball a second time, hypothetically, you could still kill that 4th ad or that 5th ad or whatever. But it makes it, significantly harder. But the fact that there is a mechanic in that fight that instantly one-shots the entire group, I don't like about it. And I think that is difficult for me to say I like that fight. I like the components of the fight. The fact that every single person, if one person fucks up, instantly kills everyone, I don't like that. And I think that's enough for me to say I don't like that fight. If that fight didn't have that severe of a punishment, or, if they figured out a way to make it as punishing, but not just complete raid wipe, where it's like if the team is skilled enough or geared enough, they can handle it, I think that I would be more fine with it. But because it's just everyone dies, I'm not really fine with it. I think
I'm gonna get flamed in guild chat for this conversation, I'm sure, but I think I like the boss. I like the boss design. Tuning, like you're arguing one way or another, like that's a completely different thing. I think for boss design, I like the fight. I like the
I'll give you a win for that one. All the little components, they're fine. I like it. It's an interesting, unique fight.
What I think would have been awesome is instead of just one-shotting the raid, the entire raid takes a debuff for 10 seconds. They have 100% reduced healing taken. So if you miss a ball, nobody can get healed for 10 seconds, which means you have to have a tank roll fucking cooldowns or they are dead. And then you wipe if that's the case. Or if somebody takes a tick from anything, and I'm saying leave the fight exactly as it is. So if you have that little spirit thing that pops out, I can't remember what it's called. If you have that thing spawn
Soulflame.
and then somebody misses a ball, you're gonna die. And that would be fine compromise to me too. But I just mean mechanically as a whole, I think Zanesh is a really interesting boss fight. I haven't seen a boss fight that's been that interesting to me in a simplistic, this is the goal, this is how you achieve it. It's a little hard since Orgorger, probably. Orgorger, when you first walked in, was like, oh, so this is the room. You got to get them to roll onto these things. That's easy. And then it was like, oh, this is much harder than it initially looked like. Fuck. You know? And it was not as punishing as Zanesh. Like, let's be honest, Zanesh is a mid of the tier boss, whereas Orgorger was second.
Yeah.
So it can't be, but kind of in that sense where mechanically it's interesting. It's still kind of a tank and spank, but with an interesting little twist, which I think is the part to me that is really, really interesting. And I can take or leave the one shot. You know, the compromise is there if you want it, but yeah.
Fair enough. I'll agree with the point that the fight is definitely interesting. Every mechanic is cool. I wish it just didn't one-hit kill the entire raid, because it feels really fucking bad to be like, yeah, that was me. Sorry, we just wiped 3 minutes in the pool because the ball was 1 centimeter to the left. My bad, team.
But thinking on it now, Devil's Advocate, we're all involved in the fight. What about the people that have never kicked the ball? Like, how boring is that fight? They don't have interrupt, and they don't interrupt. They don't.
Please
kick the
let
ball.
me play it boring. Somebody take my kick so I can parse.
Like, but then it becomes the only thing you have to worry about is not getting hit by the dance, not getting hit by not standing on your soul flay, which we've had people just stand on their soul flay and move to the boss. So keep within range of the boss to damage it. Like, that's the mechanics of the fight.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, if you're not involved in the fight at all, I could see that being a really boring fight.
Yeah.
I agree. On that same note, though, I think that there are other bosses in the tier, and again, I haven't played a ton, but I think that there are other bosses in this fight or in this tier that are like really, really interesting, that have mechanics that I personally haven't seen before. Like, a good example would be like the orbs on Drestagath. I haven't seen too many fights, but the fact that it's not a kill the boss fight, it's kill all of the ads, and then you're basically just fighting a timer, and like killing the ads gives you a reward of being able to kill the boss a little bit. I feel like that's something that's a little bit more interesting, because usually when I go into a boss, it's like, okay, fucking blow the shit out of the boss, and if something spawns, you can kill it. But in this case scenario, it's literally the opposite, so it's like unintuitive thinking. Or like on Raw Den, like you get a debuff that just, if you hit 100% life, you just kill everyone. So now your healers are like in a really weird spot where they have to do something dynamically different than what they're used to. I think that those are really cool, just mechanic differences that they put into this raid encounter. And like for that, I give the Blizzard team that does raids a lot of credit for making this tier really interesting.
I mean, especially when you consider how many fucking tiers they've had with how many different bosses, and they're still doing mechanics that are new and fresh.
Right.
Like certain things, yeah, they'll borrow from other fights. Zanesh, I've never seen the ball kick before in another raid. I mean, I may be missing something, but you know, I can't think of one.
Not
and
only
the fact that they're coming up with the new things.
Not only are they, coming up with new bosses and boss mechanics and how they work together, but they're also doing that with dungeon bosses. Like, sure, they borrow mechanics here and there, but if you think about it, that is so much work that you have to do. You've got several raid bosses, and then on Mythic, you've got several mechanics in one fight per boss, and then you've got 40 bosses over the course of an expansion, and then on top of that, the 30 something bosses in dungeons. And I mean, that's just phenomenal. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I still play WoW is the raiding. The dungeons haven't gotten old. Every expansion brings something new.
Right. Well, and you've seen, like we've briefly talked about, you've seen certain fights where there'll be a mechanic, like I can't remember what it was in was it early Legion? There was a dungeon where at the end it would spawn a wall of minions that would walk towards you. You'd have to pick the right one and kill it so you have an open spot, and it was just a 5-man dungeon.
Oh, Wardens. The Warden Dungeon. Shit, what was that place called?
Vault of the Wardens.
Yes, Vault of the Wardens. That was it.
That mechanic was first in Draenor, I want to say, in the place where you fought, I want to say Gul'dan. No, not Gul'dan. It was the other fucking warlock. Can't remember. Whatever. Orc warlock, last boss of the 5-man dungeon.
Ner'zhul?
Yeah, Ner'zhul.
Yeah, it was
the Ner'zhul fight. You had to do that very same thing. You had a walking wall of his summons that you would have to deal with, and once you did that, then kill him. Blah blah blah. I mean, that same thing is in Skitra, but they didn't just copy paste it. They put it so only half the raid can see it. Half the raid seeing something is brand new. Right, like, or half the raid can see one thing, half the raid can see the other thing. Like, you've got to kill this ad, but only half the raid can see it. Meanwhile, you've got a wall walking towards you that if it touches you, it one-shots you. And oh, by the way, only the other half of the raid can see it. I thought that was really cool.
It's more akin.
Wanted to say
it's more akin to the Mother's Wall. It's more akin to Mother's Wall,
right? Like, yeah.
Skitra's is. Sorry.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. But I also love the fact that I don't know if they did it on accident or if they did it on purpose, but no weak aura's work for Skitra, I think is fucking awesome.
Oh, it's got to be on purpose. They've been locking down add-ons more and more over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but weak aura's work for everything else, but for whatever reason. Like, okay, Rawdan isn't perfect, the Il'gynoth weak aura isn't perfect. If you get hit by a certain mechanic, those weak auras do break. But there just isn't one for Skitra. People just don't make it because it just doesn't work at all.
Well,
and I think that's hilariously awesome.
The interesting thing for Skitra is like the weak auras and add-ons, as far as like what their base premise is that you're supposed to be able to have one. Anything that you could write down on paper, you can turn into a weak aura, or you can turn into an add-on. But for Skitra, because you literally can't see it, there's not really a way to do it. It would have to be so complex, and it would be multiple working parts. That at that point, that's just cheating. So I think in that design, that's a huge win on the WoW's team, because it really strives to have players that are on top of their game and understand what they're doing and fully understand the mechanic, instead of just having something like, for example, if you could have an add-on that would just place markers at where the wall was, and it would just like the add-on, the wall would move and the marker would move, that would break the fight so easily. Yeah. But I mean, that's not even that important, because the mechanic is not even really that bad in essence. But
all it would take really is for everybody to have the weak aura, and only those with assists can place the world markers, and boom, it's fixed. There you go. Weak aura creators, if anybody is still working on Skitra prog, I just gave you an idea for weak aura. Enjoy your free kill. Send all royalties to Psy Guild at Hyjal server, US. Thank you.
Oh man.
But I think that's interesting. I did want to touch on something, and it'll, I guess, kind of be a transition to bring us into the next topic. I apologize slightly for the rant. I need to make a distinction on the term borrowed power. That term gets tossed around a lot, and some people, I'm not going to give it a definition. I'm going to say what it means for me, and then you guys can say if you agree or whatever. No, I'm absolutely not. I just turned it off. Anyway, I'll say what it means for me, and you guys can tell me if you agree or disagree. Borrowed power, to me, is everything that includes, like, Azerite power, corruptions, essences, all of that. The one thing I've heard so many times over and over and over repeated was that people are excited that borrowed power is going away with pre-patch and that Shadowlands won't have borrowed power. That is not the case.
At all.
Covenants are borrowed power. We are not going to have them forever. Our legendary items that we're going to be building is borrowed power. And I think it's an important distinction to make as we move into the conversation about Shadowlands, because the core structure of the game, or more specifically the class that you play, I think we can all agree is going to get changed over time as the game develops. The most recent one that hit me is, as a Shadow Priest main currently, is the change to Insanity and how that actually interacts with the class. I don't want to get into how Shadow Priests feel about Insanity because it's very much split down the middle. A lot of people like the Insanity, a lot of people don't like the Insanity. And I'm talking about the decaying Insanity that, ticks and you're fighting against it the whole time. That playstyle is going to be gone in Shadowlands. There's going to be a talent where you can get it back, but it's going to be shit. Doesn't matter. Anyway, borrowed power helps you as a Shadow Priest get there. I need a ton of experience so that I can stay in shadow form longer, my damage goes higher. The same thing could be said with, I'm sure, like haste for hunters or whatever, for like marksmen or whatever, keeping up your rapid fire or exponentially getting the increase from your rapid fire. I'm not a hunter main. I'm sure Meeps can divulge a little bit into that more, but it's not like it's going away. It's still gonna be there. It's something that I feel like people are completely overlooking because they hate corruption and essence and Azerite power so much right now that they're like, oh, I'm glad it's going to be gone, but not realizing that while we're getting off of one train, we're about to hop on to another train that we don't know what's in the train cars yet.
Yep.
We can see the manifesto, but we don't know if it's right.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's the thing that I've kind of been taking a little bit of grain of salt every time I read a patch note or whatever, or every time somebody's like, oh man, I can't wait for BFA to be over and all this borrowed power to be gone. Because it doesn't line up.
Unfortunately, they're just wrong. Like, borrowed power will be there in some form, just whether or not it's as toxic as it is now.
I guess that's really smart people in our guild that are saying it. I don't want to out you guys, but not you guys, but if you guys watch this, you know who you are.
I was just out. Fuck.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been stating how excited I am for corruption to be gone in the pre-patch. Like, I'm ready for that. I'm ready for as much borrowed power to be gone as possible. And I've been keeping an eye on the alpha and the beta for Shadowlands to see, because they're like, the grind's going away, no more, Azerite power grind. And it's really funny that they come up with Anima as their next resource that we're gonna have. Like, they said we aren't gonna have to grind it, but that's the third AP in a row that we're actually gonna have to grind, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as borrowed power as a whole, I think that it's important to have a little bit in each expansion because it makes the expansion meaningful. Imagine if you went into an expansion and there was just nothing. That was like, there's nothing new and important. It was just you got a little bit more power creep that it feels pointless. But going into like Legion, it was really cool to feel like I'm trying really hard this expansion to level up my weapon and then get Concordance of Leadenfall. But this expansion, with how much it is, and more specifically what it entails, I think is why it's bad. Like, I'm fine with knowing that borrowed power is going to be a thing, but I would hate if it's like, oh yeah, by the way, in next expansion there's going to be, if I was told this in Legion, at the start of Legion, going to BFA, there's going to be 3 pieces of armor, and there's going to be almost no way to farm it, but they're the most important piece of gear you have. And it's going to be super influential, and there's another thing, your necklace, that you need to farm in order to make that armor work. Did I mention that it's the most important piece of your entire build? If I was hearing that, I'd be like, you're fucking crazy, dude. Like, no, that sounds awful. So, yeah, I'm fine with borrowed power. I'm fine with feeling strong and getting some power creep in some essence. But, like, the degree is where it's a problem. When it's AP that leads into Azerite gear, and that Azerite gear leads into a specific build, and then you need essences to round out the specific build based on everything else, that's when it's just too fucking much. And I really hope it's not that bad come Shadowlands. If it's like, you need to pick a certain covenant, and then that covenant infects, certain raid fights, or it affects certain gear drops that you get, then it would be really, really shitty. and that could potentially ruin the game. As long as they're not interwoven like it was in BFA, I think Shadowlands will be much better as far as bar power. So TLDR, bar power is good. You just have to do it right. You have to make it more balanced and more fair, and not make it everything in the entire system. It has to be a fun thing, not the most important decision you have to make.
I think it's funny that they kind of got rid of sets and then replaced them with sets.
Right.
Yeah, actually, that does feel
tier sets are gone, but right now you have Azerite armor, and in Shadowlands, I'm not sure what we're going to have to replace that. I think Anima and all that system. I haven't looked too much into the systems of Shadowlands. Because I've been catching up on my priest or mage at the time, and then priest, and it's like, okay, I don't want to take on too much. But now that I've kind of picked my main for Shadowlands, I can dive into it hella. But it's interesting to me that they're like, we don't want to do sets anymore. We want things to be interesting. So here's some sets of different kind, just with Azerite traits that you only want 3 traits anyways, so you only want a specific couple of items anyways, so everything else is just whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Meeps, how do you feel about Bard power?
well, I was thinking it's going to be an echo chamber. I think it's good for excitement, it's something to work toward during the expansion. I liked the artifact weapons at the end. Like, and this has all been experimental, which is why I try not to gripe too much, because I would prefer that they experiment and fail and then learn from the experiment. But it seems like they didn't really learn from Legion, except in Legion. Like, so in the beginning, it was pretty rough, but then they ironed it out, they iterated, and by the end, artifact weapons were the best part of Legion, in my opinion. Legendaries were... I mean, the acquisition method was also awful at the beginning and got better as it went on. However, I think obviously they didn't learn their lesson completely, because we're seeing legendary come back in Shadowlands that have power attached to them. And that was something... Sorry. That was something that they should have learned in Legion, to not attach power to legendaries, because like you only want these legendaries. It becomes just it's like a talent choice. Like, you've got these 10 talents, these 10 legendaries, and you can pick 2 of them. Well, you're going to pick the most powerful ones. Done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you could get more interesting utility ones that would lead to more choice and more fun gameplay, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, I think when people think about their character, they try to just build whatever does the most damage or does the most healing.
Right.
Like,
I mean, that's always going to be the core aspect of the game, though, because you're always chasing that power curve, right? So whatever's going to get you, that is what you're going to go for, especially if, well, it doesn't matter what your focus is on the game. If you're a Mythic Plus main, you want to do what's best for Mythic Plus. If you're a Raider main, you want to do what's best for that. If you're PvP main, same thing. But in those variations, you're still going to take whatever's best for the specific thing that you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
what Meeps said is like having like really cool utility things. I think it'd be sick to have just a couple legendaries that have like some insane utility thing. So you might not do as much damage, but it might make you change how you do a certain fight, or it might, change your perspective of how you play your class, or how you, approach a dungeon, or how you set yourself up for a healer mechanic or something like that. So I think that could be really interesting, as long as they were worth it, as long as they were balanced enough to make sense.
And it could also translate to power in itself, like a legendary that there's a 2-minute cooldown, but then once the cooldown's up, you pop it, and for 10 seconds you can cast while moving. I know this has been an ability in the game, right? Especially Shaman. I don't remember if you came in after Shamans had that ability, Rise, but there was an ability where you could pop it and just move and cast while moving.
Funny thing, Spirit Walker's Grace was apparently all Shamans, and now come Shadowlands, they're getting it back. So I will be able to do that now, and you better believe I'm going to put that thing on cooldown.
Right.
As you should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, bring back Gust of Wind. Blizzard, please.
Look, the great unpruning though. I mean that's pretty good transition. See how slick that was. Now I'm ruining it by calling attention to it.
Yeah, you should stop.
The great unpruning of Shadowlands, I think, is fucking awesome for every class. I hate pruning to begin with. I don't care if my class has 100 buttons. I'm probably still going to keybind them all. But at least I have options in a raid. When you start taking things away, I feel like I have less options. Even if Shackle Undead is literally never used, I'm thankful that I still had it so that in King's Rest, when shit got crazy and we had a bolstered mob that had like 70 stacks and 1% hit points and our tank died, I could shackle it and wait for him to come back. That was nice. I appreciate that. Thank you, Blizzard. If they would have just taken that away because Shackle Undead's never used, like, you know, certain other abilities for certain other classes, I'm not going to specifically single one out, but it allows for more options. It allows for you to be more variable as a player in whatever situation you want to put yourself in. And I think that having all of these abilities come back is fucking phenomenal. And player agency, I am a huge fan of. So things like totems back for shamans, aside from just Healing Tide Totem and Spirit Link Totem, having totems back is awesome. That's your core class fantasy since vanilla. And the fact that it's back, I mean, if you want to be a shitty shaman and never drop your totems, cool, get benched. But if you want to be an awesome shaman, drop Wind Fury for all your rogues and warriors.
Yeah, I feel that.
It's fucking phenomenal. And I love that player choice. When they took that away, it was like, we're going to bake it into the class.
Yeah, another I guess viewpoint, something, because again, I didn't always play those older expansions, but something I think is really cool is how they're just bringing back so much random stuff, and also how they're redoing some of the classes, because Blizzard over time has seen feedback, whether it's good or bad, depending on the class, and Jay, you can rant about that one later if you want. I think it's very interesting that they're, like, I've seen Shaman in this builder-spender kind of format where I build up a bunch of Maelstrom and then I dump Urshocks. Whereas now it's going to be much different where I get the choice and I'm getting stacks, but it's not just a resource I'm managing. It's just a couple stacks makes something else a little bit less cast time. So I can just sit there and cast Urshock if I wanted to, or I could do a couple other spells and then get a free Urshock or a more powerful Urshock or a free Earthquake. You know, that kind of stuff seems really, really interesting as far as just how much Blizzard wants to shape different classes or change the meta, I guess, is the way that I would think of it. And just having all those old abilities back is going to be really, really interesting just to see how diverse it can get. Because as a shaman, I'm going to be getting, I can get chain heal now when I'm an elemental, so I can actually like kind of raid heal or spot heal a couple people in a dungeon, which I think is really, really cool. Depending on the covenant, if I pick Vesper Totem, I can actually like do a good amount of healing as a cooldown or a DPS cooldown. Just having totems that I can just drop to potentially take aggro or deal damage is going to be something that's really, really unique and new. So I think that's going to be a really exciting experience for me, personally, and I hope that transmutes to other classes too.
Right.
How about you, Meeps? How are you feeling as a primarily hunter main, right? I think they're getting a lot of stuff back too.
Not anymore.
You haven't heard?
I'm melee now. I'm melee tank.
Ooh.
I'm either going to be playing... Well, and it's actually mostly because of Shadowlands. And because of the state we're in with the raid right now, whenever we were talking about one of our tanks might need to leave for a week, and we don't really have a suitable backup. That freaked me out a little, so I was like, well, in Shadowlands, I'll play something that I can just throw on a shield and tank if we need to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like a quick Band-Aid.
Yeah. And I settled, I want to play Kitty, but I don't want to ever play Bear, ever. So I settled on either Warrior Paladin is what I'm looking at as my main DPS, and then I'll tank with whatever it comes to. But the reason I went Warrior Paladin was the Covenants and, you know, the power that comes out of the Covenant. Both of them have a support power from the Covenant, which I've wanted forever. Like I've wanted a fourth role since the idea came to me, and even before Final Fantasy XIV and the Bard class, which is the support / DPS class. Just the idea of having a support role that it can be a damage support role, so they'll do reduced damage, but they'll buff everyone else's damage. And the Paladin and Warrior have that in Shadowlands. The Warrior has a banner that you can throw down that will buff the attack speed of everyone. I think by, was it 50%? Everyone in your party?
Yeah.
It was a really high amount.
Yeah.
It's based on how many stacks you gain, though,
Right.
per killing blows.
Well,
it's really cool.
That's the duration is based on stacks. It's just a flat buff, though. And then the Paladin has a really interesting one where it's on a 15-second cooldown, but it activates a new ability that lasts for a minute. So, like for a brief second, if you're smashing the button, then you can have all 4 up it for like a split second. But for the most part, you've got 3 buffs running at all times. And I forget what they are, though, but they're pretty much for each role. Like, they help damage, they help healing, they help tanking.
Yeah. So it's like Blessing of the Autumn, or that
seasons. Yeah.
It was really cool.
Speaking of covenants, because I've only looked into a couple primarily because of the Shaman Discord has been up in arms trying to figure out if the Venthyr covenant is going to be broken, the teleportability.
Preemptively Google.
Yeah.
Right.
Have you guys looked into the covenant system that much? Because again, we were talking about Bard Power before, so I guess this is a decent segue. What are your guys' thoughts of the current system, at least as far as what it looks like of Bard Power, assuming you've seen it? Because the minimal research that I've done, it seems like they're trying to figure out a good balance to making it something that you're choosing forever and something that you can have some leniency between, and also making it fairly balanced. Whereas some of them on paper might seem really good, it seems that a lot of people are taking a step back and saying, well, it might be really good to have, this little bit of utility, but it also might be good to just take, a damage route, or to take, something that'll help out your entire raid, like that banner cooldown you were talking about. So have you guys researched any of your covens at all, or put much thought into it?
I've actually... You want me to take this first, Jay?
Yeah, go.
Okay. I've, for the most part, I don't even know what ability each covenant grants you. I've done research to see what, like, the Kyrian gives the Paladin, especially the Prop Paladin. Everyone knows about the Prop Paladin, who can throw out 5 shields with the Kyrians right now. So those abilities I've looked at, because that's what's really interesting to me. But I haven't looked at, like, what specifically, like the Venthyr teleport. I haven't really looked at that. But from what I can tell, from everything I know of Shadowlands, which, to be fair, isn't a whole lot, but I think they're really trying to break the community perception of cookie cutter. Like, everyone gets the same... They don't want everyone going with the same covenant. They don't want, they don't want all Ellie Shamans to go with this covenant for this ability. They're trying to break that at the high end, which I don't know how successful that might be, but I think it's working on me so far, because I'm much more interested in the fun covenants. Like, I'm more interested in what will be fun to play than what will be the most powerful by 2%.
Right.
Fair.
I think for me it's kind of a similar answer, but obviously I have kind of always wanted to just pick the best options just because it's the best. This is probably the first time looking at the Covenant abilities. It's the only in-depth research I've done about Shadowlands at all, is I've looked into my new main's Covenant ability. It's probably the first time that I'm going to pick something that on paper might not be the best, but is just fucking fun. There's really 2 that that brewmasters are really looking at. There's the Weapons of Order from it is Kyrian, where you just get what is it called? You just get a bunch more mastery. It's like 10% more mastery that you just get. And your Keg Smash cooldowns reset instantly. Enemies hit by Keg Smash take 5% increased damage, and it stacks. but apparently the duration only is 8 seconds. So it's like you have to hit it like immediately in that global or it's going to fall off. The way that it's worded is weird, and until I can actually play pre-patch or, well, you wouldn't be able to pre-patch. Until I can get some beta access or have Brian play it a bunch for me and tell me how it feels, I can't really say. But it looks like that one's going to be like the cookie cutter go-to for most. But the one that I'm excited for is the Feline Stomp from the Night Fae. Never thought I'd say that, but it looks awesome. I mean, it's going to be best for damage. It's going to be best for Mythic Plus, which, I mean, hey, that's a plus because I love Mythic Plus. But it's just fucking cool. So the way that it works is you stomp, and this like feline like earthquake eruption happens out in front of you in various random directions. It looks like a big lightning tree on the ground. Instantly ignites all of the enemies that it hits with Breath of Fire, as well as dealing a bunch of nature damage, which is awesome. But if you stand anywhere in that feline, every button you press has a 10% chance to reset Feline Stomp, which is fucking awesome, because then you just hit Feline Stomp, do your rotation, hitting your buttons, and every button you press can reset it. So you could literally just get like 4 in a row where you just like stomp, 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 and just clear house. It's going to be awesome. Completely RNG, and I'm okay with it. It just thematically, the whole fucking thing, I'm just like, woo! I love it. Even if it sucks, I'm gonna love it. It just looks so cool.
All right. That's actually pretty exciting. Well, the thing I think is really interesting about that is one thing that I've wanted to make sure that they do is that if you're picking a covenant and it's really like a choice that you have to pick, it needs to feel like you're a part of that covenant. Like being able to just teleport, like have a little blood splatter, sure, that might be the Venthyr kind of thing. But I feel like if you're picking a covenant, it should be something thematic and cool that represents that you're part of that covenant. So that tree ability on paper just sounds cool to me as well. Yeah. Me personally, because I have a very different opinion on certain, how I play, I guess I should say, I am already, assuming that I'm picking Elemental Shaman, I am 100% picking Vesper Totem. It will give me the ability to have a healing cooldown for myself when I'm playing a DPS class. And one of the things that I enjoy a lot about Shaman specifically is being able to heal myself in hectic situations. Because if I can lose a little bit of damage, most of the time it won't matter. But if I'm healing myself or healing someone else, that's one less person a real healer has to worry about. They can heal someone else, and usually it can prevent a wipe or it can save one other person's life, and that's a raid kill versus dying a little bit early on a prog fight or something like that. So the fact that I will now have access to either a healing or a DPS cooldown in Vesper Totem just seems really, really cool to me personally, because that'll enhance my playstyle of being able to keep myself or someone else alive in any scenario, whether it's world content, dungeon content, Mythic Plus. If I'm doing it in PvP, maybe it'll be good. I don't know. But raiding as well, I can see that will have a lot of power potential. And maybe it's not the best pick for raw parsing on damage, but I think that kind of idea will definitely save maybe my life, someone else's life in a raid encounter, and maybe that will help us get a prog kill. So I think that's what I'm personally going to pick with from the research that I've done, which again, I'm in Meeps' boat, kind of slim to none, but it is what it is until we get our hands on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Hal, I'm pretty sure your Tremor Totem has saved us on Sinesh before.
Good Tremor Totem. Oh, if Shamans didn't have Tremor Totem, I would feel so much more worthless. I can cheese so many mechanics with that. OP Totem. Yeah. Never take it away.
It really has saved us a lot, though. Like, it's very good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, have you guys looked into conduits at all, or just the Covenant abilities?
I've only looked in the abilities.
I've looked at a picture of some of the covenants, and it looks like just a skill tree, so I'm going to assume that at some point I'll be able to pick a skill tree, and I'll probably just pick whichever one's best, or whatever the community says is the best, and then it'll probably be wrong, and something will change, and I'll have to regrind it. But, that's the game. How about you?
I've looked at them a bit. It's a really contentious point right now, because you can only change your conduits once a week, but it's just like the covenants for me. I think the way they're set up, you'll be able to you can have 3 set up, and you can switch between them like talents, like rested area. You can switch to a different conduit system, and you can set them up ahead of time. So ideally, you would have one set up for raid, but then you got a druid who can only have 3, but they like to tank Mythic Plus, they like to PvP on the boomkin, they like to heal or DPS in Mythic Plus in a raid. So I think from someone that does a lot of roles on one character, it's going to be a nightmare. But for everyone else, I don't think it'll really be that onerous.
Well, I mean, if you're able to change it once a week or twice a week, I also feel like that's a good balance for saying, okay, well, I'm going to go to raid now. I need to turn on this, and maybe tomorrow I won't do any dungeons because I'm raiding tomorrow as well. And then, raid's done for the week. I can switch to my PvP set or my Mythic Plus set if it's a push week. So at least if you're able to change some of it, I think that's a healthy decision. When we were talking earlier about caustic, borrowed powers, or game design, I think that'll be good.
Unless you're in a guild with a weird raid schedule.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
true.
You're just fucked. Like if you raid like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday or something, like sorry, you're never doing anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can't switch. Just pick something generic.
Yeah.
That's what feels bad, man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we've covered pretty much everything that we wanted to hit on today. So I've got a question for you guys, and for anyone that wants to respond in the comments section whenever I upload this to YouTube. If you are the lead game designer for Blizzard, what is one thing you would change, add, or remove from WoW?
Are you talking overall, or are you thinking just Shadowlands? Just to clarify.
Going into Shadowlands.
Okay, if it was me personally, I would say every part of every character's toolkit, just unlock it. Let people go fucking crazy. Because yeah, some people will iron out what's the best, but giving the player agency and the ability to like change how like their abilities work and stuff like that, I think that would be monumental. To just look at your tool, like look at your spellbook and have like 6 pages of spells that you just go and read, and then you realize like, wow, these like 5 abilities really work good here, and if I'm going to do this dungeon, I want to make sure that I can shackle undead, and so like going in there, you grab that ability. I think that'll give a lot of players more agency about what they want to do. It'll also expand how good a top player can be to show them off, like, oh, I came to this dungeon and I have 5 new spells on my spellbook because like I've just rotated them in and out, and it's going to make a difference. I think that would be really, really cool. I see some bad side to that too, but I'm sticking with it. Being able to go crazy with your class, have a million things, and also just having that kind of diversity would be really, really awesome, I think. That's what I would personally do. Just unlock the whole thing. Any spell you've ever had, back in the game. Unless, obviously, for whatever reason, it was really broken and they removed it for that reason. Like Alter Time was, I guess.
Synthesis for druids.
I was gonna... Go ahead, sir.
Synthesis for druids.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to give a cop-out answer. I was going to say remove power choices from talents and make talents something that's a little bit more like CC versus mobility choices and stuff like that. That seems like it's going to be a nightmare to balance. You know what? No, I'm going to take that answer. I'm going to say remove damage choices from talents, period. Make each class be each class, right? So a ret pally is a ret pally is a ret pally. Any talent choices that you take on your talent tree, when you hit N and you go down and select all your talents, all you're doing there is selecting, whether you want to select second Celestial Steed, or whether you want the ability to add 2 blessings to the raid, or whether you want the ability to cut your Divine Shield cooldown by 30 seconds. Stuff like that will, maybe give you more survivability, maybe give you more CC options, maybe more mobility options, maybe something even that I'm not even thinking of, something that can make you a little bit more supporty if you're like a rogue or something that you can do that it just adds something else to the raid that would make you be able to choose something that could give you a little bit more player agency, but doesn't punish you for not going down the cookie cutter tree, because we all know no matter how much they try to make a non-cookie cutter tree, you are going to pick the cookie cutter tree because there is only one best option, and you have to pick it if you want a mythic raid. And I'm mostly saying this because I'm upset about Shadow Priest, but that's neither here nor there. What I will say, though, is specifically in terms of Shadow Priests, because they have a playstyle and now it's changing, I would like the option to be able to play the former playstyle, and this is where balancing gets really pain in the ass. If you don't like the insanity drain aspect and you don't like that playstyle, I'm okay with that. That's totally cool. I won't be playing Shadow Priest main next expansion and going Brewmaster because they locked it behind a talent choice. And as I just said, there's only one best option. Lingering Insanity won't be it, or Legacy of the Void won't be it, at least not until way later in the tier, and I'm not going to wait that long to play the class that I actually love fucking playing. So make it about a choice for agency, CC, something like that. Nothing numerically as far as damage or healing or raw throughput as far as tanking goes. Just make the talents a little bit less important to how your class actually functions, unless you wanted to actually make an option for, utility. I think that's the one thing I would do. It would be fucking hard, but that's my suggestion. That's, if I'm lead game dev, that's what I'm doing.
I had two, but I forgot what the second one was because Jay was talking forever. So
it happens.
I'm just gonna go with the simple one. Bring back challenge modes. I don't want to scale up I don't want to go into ever increasingly, it's harder because they have more health and do more damage in the dungeon. I want to get through the dungeon as efficiently as possible. See what kind of tricks we can pull to get around mobs and go through things as quickly as possible. But with that, it's the end of the show for tonight. Thank you all for watching. And
don't forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, comment your suggestion below.
Right. Mm-hmm. We want to hear from you guys. And as always,
anything that's like chuckle, we'll mention it.
Right. But keep it simple. Have a good night. Bye, guys.
Have a good night.